Today we're going to talk about joy even when your Christmas is less than perfect. Things may be far from ideal in your life. And if they are, understand that's probably where the rest of the people are here today, including myself. There's really no such thing as the perfect Christmas. True story of some grade school kids at church that were going to put on the Christmas play. And one boy wanted to be Joseph so bad, but he didn't get the part. He had to be the innkeeper that rejects them and says there's no room for you. And he wasn't happy. His biggest rival got to play Joseph. And he was fuming about it. He was steamed. And he thought, what can I do to get even? And so the night of the play came, and Mary and Joseph walk up to the inn, and they say, may we have a room? We really need a room. My wife is about to give birth to a child. And the kid goes off script. Instead of saying, sorry, no room, he goes, sure, come on in. We have plenty of rooms. And everybody just freaked out, including Joseph. But then Joseph walked past the innkeeper, and he looked like he was looking around and examining things, and he said, come on, Mary, no wife of mine's going to stay in a dump like this. I'd rather sleep in the barn. Now, we have done a lot of Christmas plays, haven't we, Dave? And we always had a script to follow, haven't we? Everybody has had their lines, and everybody has them memorized, but there's something about it that when the night comes for the play, man, people go off script, and you think, what are they talking about? Where are we at? And we make the best of it, and we always have, even when the lines have been far from ideal and far from perfect. Well, this morning we're going to look at that first Christmas, and we're going to see if you think your Christmas might be in for a bummer this year, you better take another look at that first Christmas. I want to begin by listing, it's not in your outline yet, we'll get to that in a moment, but it's going to be on the PowerPoint. We're going to go through this story, and we're going to list about 7 things that really went wrong that first Christmas. First off, here we go. There was an unsympathetic government. Rome was in charge at that time, and we know following the birth of Christ, when the wise men come a little bit later to bring the gifts, they ask, Herod feels threatened, and here's what he does. This is, then Herod, when he saw that he had been tricked by the wise men, became furious, and he sent and killed all the male children in Bethlehem and all that region who were 2 years old and under. Talk about a government that is not supportive of the Messiah, of God, and of King Jesus. You had it then. You had it then. Today in our country, we feel that Christianity is increasingly coming under attack, and it is. But I want you to know that there are Christians today, this Christmas season, in which it'll cost them their lives in other parts of the world because of their stand for Jesus Christ. And when you look at it, you say, well, that's not a perfect Christmas season. But it never really has been. And the Jewish people were a proud people. And they were under oppression by Rome when Jesus was born. And they didn't want to admit that. They didn't want to submit to it. And there was constant warfare between the Jewish people and Rome. You remember back in John chapter 8, Jesus said, hey, you know the truth, meaning himself. And he said, the truth will set you free. And they says, We've never been enslaved to anybody. Really? You got a bad memory? Go back in history. What about the Babylonians, the Assyrians? What about those Roman soldiers standing on every street corner, keeping you in submission? But they were a proud people. They were defiant. And there was a sect among them that were called zealots, and they would carry daggers. And when there'd be a whole crowd or a mob, and the Roman soldiers trying to put things under control, they would slip into the middle of that crowd, take out their dagger, put it right into the Roman soldier, slip it back in under their garment, and walk away, another dead Roman soldier. And so Rome had a really bad attitude towards the Jewish people, and they had a bad attitude towards Rome. Nobody likes to be submissive. I remember the story of a little girl acting up in church, about 3 years old, and she insisted on standing up in the pew. And the father kept telling her, sit down. After telling her that a couple times, he finally took his 2 fingers and put them on the back of her neck, for which God created it, just for these kind of purposes. And he began to apply some pressure. And she slowly went down into the pew with tears coming down her cheeks. She looked up at her dad and whispered, I'm still standing on the inside. That was the Jewish people. They were being oppressed. And they said, we're still standing on the inside. So there was a lot of conflict when Jesus was born between the religious world and the government and the powers that be. And secondly, there was an unexpected tax. Oh, yeah. In those days, a decree went out from Caesar Augustus that all the world should be registered or a census taken. This was the first registration when Quirinius was governor of Syria. Now, that always led to a tax. You say, it doesn't say that. The older versions do. But a census or registration is just a fancy way of saying we're going to number people and get them all registered so we can increase the tax. Let me tell you, if you go out tomorrow in your mailbox and you got a letter from the IRS and they say you owe a bunch of money, how does that do for wrecking your perfect Christmas? Man, that does a number on it, doesn't it? I guess there could be worse things, but boy, that could sure shoot the perfect Christmas, the most wonderful time of the year. Right, because right after Christmas is New Year's, man, April 15th is on the minds of a lot of people. So they had an unexpected tax. Now, number 3, and this is a tough one. We can't relate to it in the fact that only happened once. An unusual pregnancy. An unusual pregnancy. Let's read. Now, the birth of Jesus Christ was as follows. When his mother Mary had been betrothed to Joseph before they came together, she was found to be with child by the Holy Spirit. Now, wow. How's this going to go over? A lot of questions are going through your mind. Let's read on. And her husband Joseph, being a just man, unwilling to put her to shame, resolved to divorce her quietly. And now verse 20. But as he considered these things, consider them. How long? We don't know. But he considered them for a while. Behold, an angel of the Lord appeared to him in a dream, saying, Joseph, son of David, do not fear to take Mary as your wife, for that which is conceived in her is from the Holy Spirit. I have a lot of questions. They could be summed up with the question, why? Why? God, aren't you just being intentionally cruel to a godly man, Joseph? Come on, why didn't you just sit down with Mary and Joseph up front and say, hey, guys, here's the game plan, all right? This is the game plan. Mary, you're going to be pregnant. Joseph, it's not going to be by no man. It's going to be by the Holy Spirit. This is my part of my plan, the virgin birth. And explain it all to them up front, and they say, oh, hey, Good. We'll sign on. Where's the contract? We'll sign on the dotted line. We're all aboard. Well, Mary finds out before Joseph. So she has the task of trying to explain it to Joseph. Now, seriously, is there any woman here that would like to be in her shoes and try to explain that to your fiance? It's almost impossible for it to go well. Why? Why, God? Why'd you do this to Joseph? Why not tell him up front? It says he considered these things. He said, here's my choices. And he thought about them before God finally spoke to him and revealed. I don't get it. Except maybe it wasn't so much for Joseph as it was for me. For God to say, just be patient. Just hang in there. I'm under no obligation to explain to you up front what I'm going to do. Just trust me. And we see the character of Joseph and the fact he could have said, that's it. I'm going to make a public announcement. And had that happened, she would have been stoned to death because that's what the law said for unfaithfulness. That was even an option for Joseph. He says, man, we're just going to do this as quietly as possible. And it really shows something about his character. Shows that he didn't just go into a rage and lash out at her or hit her or go off like a crazy man and yell and scream at her and all these accusations. None of those words are recorded. He just thought deeply and looked at the options and thought, which is best, not for himself and his pride, but which would be best for Mary. Now we understand why God chose a man like Joseph, don't we? Yeah. Unusual pregnancy. Oh, that brings us to the fourth one. And this one, the unbelievable journey. And Joseph went up from Galilee, from the town of Nazareth, to Judea, to the city of David, which is called Bethlehem, because he was of the house and lineage of David. Now, that's approximately 85, 90 miles. And, Mary had to ride the donkey. And Joseph obviously had to walk. I don't know which would have been worse in that condition. Guys, we can't relate to Mary, but you gals can. You can say, wow, I can't even imagine this kind of journey. Can you imagine how bad she must have felt? I remember on our honeymoon, it was a belated honeymoon. We got married in May, but we said we're going to take our real honeymoon the 1st of September. And so we went down to the Smoky Mountains to Gatlinburg. And we had a room booked there in the mountains for the entire week. And as soon as we got there, I got sick with the flu. And I mean, I was sick. I spent most of the time in the bathroom, probably more so in there than even in bed. And Sammy went out every day, kind of walked the streets, look at the shops, and eat. And I was sick as a dog. Finally, the last day, I thought, man, I've just run this whole honeymoon, vacation, this getaway. This has just been a bummer. So last day, I told her, I said, I'm feeling okay. And I said, let's do something. She goes, are you sure? I go, sure. How do you feel when you've kept nothing down, not even water, for about 4 or 5 days? And so we go driving around, and this wasn't one of my more brilliant moves, but we're driving along, and I said, oh, horseback rides through the mountains. That ought to be nice. I didn't have a lick of sense back then. We pulled in, and they had, I said, we'd like to go horseback riding on, what you got available. They said, well, we have a 1-hour ride and we have a 2-hour ride. I said, sign us up for the 2-hour ride. It just shows just how dumb your preacher can be. And lights should have gone off when they said, here's your horse. And they told it. Each one had a name, everybody. My horse's name was Red Pepper. That's the last thing you want when you're in my condition, And I get on Red Pepper, and I found out why they named him Red Pepper. They said this horse just can't walk. It just, And we started off, and about 15 minutes or 20 minutes into it, I said, are we about done? We haven't even started. Oh, wow. I said, listen, I'll catch you guys later. I'm just going to look at the countryside behind these trees over here. And I got off the horse. They waited down the path for me. I came back, and I don't know how many pit stops that day we made, 6, 7, 8, I don't know. But after 2 hours, well, really turned into about 2 hours, 45 minutes, thanks to me. But we come back. And by the time we come back, I look like that Western movie where the guy's been shot and he's draped over the horse. You know, his head's on one side hanging down and his feet on the other. That was me. You know, that was me. I tell you, it was the worst day of my life, I think, physically. I could not have felt worse. I can't imagine Mary, riding a donkey for 85, 90 miles in that condition. That's why we call it an unbelievable journey. But then it gets even worse, this less than perfect Christmas. Look at the next one, number 5, undesirable lodging. And she gave birth to her firstborn son and wrapped him in swaddling cloths and laid him in a manger because there was no place for them in the inn. Have you ever thought what was it like out there in that barn? I mean, how do we relate to that? How many here would have a story to tell about staying in a flea bag of a motel some night? You know, are there any? Yeah, I bet so. I bet so. I should have asked this last week, and we could have done some videotaping and some interviews of people that have just stayed in some dumps, you know, to maybe kind of appreciate what it was like for them, how bad it really was. I got thinking this week, and I thought, oh, yeah, there's this episode. There's this episode on I Love Lucy, not Andy Griffith, but an I Love Lucy episode where the Ricardos and the Mertzes are traveling, and they stop at a flea bag of a motel. And you think you've had some bad nights and some bad motels. It's hard to top this one.
I can't sleep in this hole.
Rick, our mattress is just like that at home. We'll trade with you.
Are you sure?
Yeah, I know. Come on, we'll trade.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you very much.
What's going on?
Get up, friend.
What?
Get up, we're going to trade with that.
Get up for what?
Come on.
Oh, what?
I am. No, wait just a minute now. Come on. Now, go. You do that every night? Yeah, but it took years of practice. Ricky. The baby's crying. See what's the matter?
Hold on, everybody. Hold on. Here comes the next one. Here it comes.
Oh, you think you've had some bad motels. That one's hard to beat, isn't it? But I have some questions before we move on to the untimely birth. What was the temperature out there that night? Don't you wonder that? The Bible never tells us. Was it 38 degrees or was it 78 degrees? I don't know. How'd they keep warm? Or did they need to? Or was it hot? Well, there's a lot we really don't know. But they end up sleeping in the barn. We have a barn on our farm, and I can tell you one thing. I wouldn't like sleeping out there at night. I don't care what night of the year it was. You think of not just the animals. You think of the mice, the rats, and everything else that goes along with it. The unsanitary conditions. The smell of manure. Wow. You just wonder if she didn't think, this is rock bottom. Forget the perfect Christmas. This is as far from perfect as it could be. Untimely birth. And while they were there, the time came for her to give birth. Boy, it just seems like, God, you got the timing on this all messed up. We would not have scheduled it then. If we were writing a play or trying to write a script for us, and I said, well, this is what we're going to do. They're going to give birth in the barn. You'd say, wait a minute. The timing's all off. No, God's right on schedule. Then number 7, unexpected visitors. Here we go. Let's read about the shepherds. The shepherds said to one another, let us go over to Bethlehem and see this thing that has happened. And they went with haste and found Mary and Joseph and the baby lying in a manger. Now, in the plays, it's, just so cute and just so adorable. Here comes the shepherds. And I don't know how you feel after giving birth. And I don't know how you feel after giving birth in a barn. And I don't know how you feel when you feel like the whole world's forsaken you. There's no room. You have the Messiah, God, in your womb. But there's no room. Families nowhere to be found. All Mary has is an inexperienced, frightened husband, Joseph. It just seems like things couldn't be worse. And then in the middle of the night, how many of you like somebody knocking on your doors and say, oh, we just thought we'd drop in and say rejoice? Do you feel like company at that moment? The shepherds said to one another, let's go over to Bethlehem, see this thing that's happened. And they went with haste, found Mary and Joseph and the baby lying in a manger. I don't know about the baby Jesus lying in a manger. I think they would have found me lying there too, right? I mean, wouldn't you have been done in at this point? But everything, no one told Mary, oh, this is where the shepherds come in. I don't think her and Joseph said, oh, yeah, we've been expecting you. Who are you? You're strangers. Were they frightened? What do they want? Are we going to be robbed? Are we going to be harmed? I don't know. All the thoughts that may have went through their mind. Maybe an angel told them, but I don't think an angel told them ahead of time as to, hey, this is what's going to happen, about the shepherds coming in. I think maybe her first thought was, naturally, what else could go wrong? But that's not what happened once God began to reveal to them through the shepherds about the angels appearing out in the fields while they were taking care of the sheep. From our perspective, if it's you and your wife in those circumstances, you say, bummer. Forget Christmas, bah humbug. Talk about the Grinch that stole Christmas. There was about 7 of them that could have stolen that first Christmas. But it didn't. Now, real quickly, there are 3 lessons if you're filling in the outline. Here we go. Number 1, God's timetable is different than ours. God's on a different timetable than us. Be patient. Be patient. But when the fullness of time had come, Galatians 4:4 said, God sent forth his son, born of woman, born under the law. The fullness of time is telling us God was right on time. I'd say, God, the timing is all messed up. But that's from a human perspective. And maybe you're looking at your life today and you're saying, it just doesn't make sense. God's nowhere around. He's just abandoned me. And I feel like I'm at rock bottom this Christmas. And I really don't have anything to rejoice about. Be patient. God's at work. And he's right on time. Let's look at some other verses here. Ecclesiastes is one of my favorite ones. He has made everything beautiful in its time, not my time. We live in a world of instant gratification. That's not God's. We have another one, Isaiah 55. I love this one. For my thoughts, God says, are not your thoughts. Neither are your ways my ways, declares the Lord. As the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts than your thoughts. So the bottom line is be patient. Trust God. He works on a different timetable, and his ways are so much higher than ours. Sometimes you can't think it out. You just trust God and wait for him to respond. But there's a second lesson, and this is key. Most of life, we can't control. Be obedient. Think about it. Much of that first Christmas was out of Mary and Joseph's control. It's out of everybody's control. God was in control. But they were still obedient to what God was revealing to them. He didn't reveal everything. He didn't reveal it maybe as soon as they wanted the information. But as he revealed it, they were obedient. Let's look at Joseph. When Joseph woke from sleep, he did as the angel of the Lord commanded him. He took his wife, but knew her not until she had given birth to a son, and he called his name Jesus. If you're not careful, you miss it. And it's huge, the significance. He did as the angel of the Lord commanded him. That's obedience. I'm sure Joseph was saying, God, I had some real big plans for Mary and I. And believe you me, they're different than the plans you've revealed to me. But God, we're going to go with your plans. I'll scrap mine. Can you do that this Christmas season? You may have some plans for this Christmas that they're just not going to come about. And you have maybe no control over it. Maybe you want some people, some family to be home for Christmas, and they're just not going to be able to be there for whatever reason. You can still obey God. You can be a righteous person and do the right thing. Maybe this Christmas somebody will mouth off to you around the table, and you're going to be hurt by somebody saying some things, and you're thinking, this is why I don't like Christmas. And you have a choice. You can respond in like manner, or you can be obedient to God and either keep your mouth shut or make certain what you say is full of grace and truth. Grace before the truth. Be obedient. Even when life is out of control. You always have that choice. And you can be in control of that decision. Righteousness and peace have kissed each other. Think about that. If you are committed to doing the right thing, and that's righteousness, following God, peace, they just go hand in hand. So even though the world around you, the circumstances you have no more control over than Mary and Joseph did, you can have peace. If you, like Mary and Joseph, make a decision to say, I want to be a righteous man. I want to be a righteous young woman. And I want to follow God and be obedient to him. That can be yours. But then there's a third and a final lesson that we learn here. And this is so important. Even when things are far from perfect, rejoice in the Lord. You don't rejoice in the bad stuff. You know, you rejoice in the Lord. And you say, God, things aren't like I would like to see them right now, but I know you're at work. And I know your will's going to be accomplished. And I want to commit myself to doing the right thing. And even though everything around me is in turmoil, I have peace. And I can rejoice. Because the joy you brought to me that first Christmas of giving me Jesus is far greater than any negative circumstances I find myself in the middle of today. You might find yourself in the middle of a storm this Christmas season. You can still rejoice. Because Jesus is still your Lord and Savior. You know, I hadn't realized it. I came across on the internet this week. It said that there are a lot of churches have what they call a blue Christmas service for people who are blue, for people who are depressed, for people who've lost loved ones, for people who are grieving, for people who are hurting, for people who are struggling with terminal illnesses. And it's usually on the 21st of December because that's the longest night of the year. And I've been told that in those services, one doctor attended them, a man by the name of Dr. Manley, and he said, I was hurting and I went to one of these services. But he said, the music was a dirge. He said, it was so sad and somber and solemn. He said, what little scriptures were read were dark. And he said, I came there looking for light. I came there looking for life. I came there looking for a message of hope. And I didn't find any. You know, I don't know anything about that, and I'm not judging them. But we don't do a blue Christmas service. We do a Christmas service. Not because of what's going on in our world, but because of what God has done in our world. And that's always a cause for celebration, no matter what. You know, it wasn't this past week. It was the week before. In fact, it was just a couple days before Thanksgiving. I got a call that dear friend of ours, a former professor, Keith McCaslin, passed away. Many of you knew Keith. He's taught more classes up here than we could ever count. And Keith and I go way back. He was our preacher at Walshville when I was in junior high and high school. And in those important years, he was the preacher I heard every week. And then I had him for 4 years of college as a professor. And he would go on and he would teach at St. Louis Christian College nearly 44 years before retiring. And Keith and I had talked in the last decade or so, and we had this agreement that if he died first, I would do his funeral, and if I died first, he would do my funeral. Well, I got the unexpected call that he passed away. And I was in the office that afternoon, about 2:30 or 3, and Tom had tried to get a hold of me, but I was on the phone, and finally came in when I got off the line, and he says, you got to call the McCaslin family right back. Keith's passed away just moments ago. And so I called him back. And Sam and I went down there, spent a day with him, and we visited with him quite a while before the visitation on Sunday afternoon. And we went over the service and such. And of all the funerals I preached, and most generally I enjoy doing funerals, but my first response was, wow, I don't know why I agreed to this. Because I knew there would be professors that had been there with Keith for 44 years teaching alongside him that could preach far better than I could. There were preachers, the whole place would be full of preachers that day. Most of them could preach better than I could. And, I thought, wow, But then something beautiful happened. Within about 12 hours that night, I woke up. I got up, and man, thoughts were just coming to me. I want to show this and this and this. And so I just wrote it all out. But there was still about another 5-6 days to the funeral because the weekend and such wouldn't be till following Monday. And this was before Thanksgiving. And I felt like a racehorse chomping at the bit. I said, God, I really feel, you're really working. You're really answering a lot of prayers of a lot of people. And, we knew above everything else, we wanted it to be a service that Keith would be pleased with. But more importantly, we'd want one that his Lord would be pleased with, because that's how he lived his life every day. And I think there were 3 here this morning that were there. There may have been others, but I know Bill Burke, you were there at the funeral on Monday. Brent and Keeley, you were there as well. Let me ask you 3. I'll let you answer this question. Have you ever been in a worship service, a song service, a praise service, more powerful than that one? No, Bill says. Brent, Keeley, where are you at? There you are. No way. Wasn't it incredible? When Anita began to play Victory in Jesus, I mean to tell you, and the people stood singing. I mean, it was an unbelievable celebration. And time we got done with the song service, I felt like going up to that pulpit and preaching like a man fighting snakes. I said, bring her on. I'm ready for it, And if you can't preach after that kind of a praise service, then you can't preach. But it was an incredible one. And it's exactly what Keith McCaslin would want. And he would say, that's because of the victory that I have won through the Lord Jesus Christ. Were there tears shed? Yeah, I shed a lot of tears. Not for Keith McCaslin's part, but for our loss. We saw him just 3 weeks earlier. Sat by him at the alumni banquet at St. Louis Christian College. We left. I told Sammy, I said, we got to go out and eat with him. I want to talk to Keith. Got some things I want to run by him and talk to him about. Haven't had a chance to do that for a while, and we need to reconnect. But that opportunity never will come. But you know what? Who wants a funeral, go in to make funeral arrangements right before Thanksgiving? And there'll be some making them before Christmas. And you say, boy, this is sure not a perfect Thanksgiving or a perfect Christmas. But I'll tell you one thing. There's all the difference in the world when Jesus is factored in or he's left out. You have no control over a lot of things. That morning, Keith got up. He and Liz ate breakfast. And he said, I tell you what, let's go see this couple in our church that's in the nursing home. He said, and then we'll go eat Steak and Shake. That was his favorite place to eat lunch almost every day. And Liz says, great, I'll go get ready, honey, and we'll go. And he says, well, I'm going to work at my desk some, and we'll go. So she comes back downstairs, whatever, and she says, honey, I'm ready. And she goes over to his desk, and she finds that he's slumped over and that he would never come respond again and that he would be dead just a few hours later. Wow. What a way to live your life. Up to the last moment, still ministering, reaching out to people, visiting the sick, encouraging the lonely and the depressed. That's how Keith and Liz have lived their life. And that's why you have a service in which everybody who knew him that was there would stand and sing and shout at the top of their lungs, because Keith won the victory through Jesus Christ. You know, you have no control probably over when you're going to die. But you have all control over how it's going to be afterwards by the decisions you make right now. I want to encourage you, if you've never done it, get your life right with God through Jesus Christ. Christmas is not just a sentimental time where we give gifts to each other and we sing some songs, we decorate trees. Oh, it's just a wonderful time of the year. Jesus is the light that shines in a dark world. And people are going through some unbelievable storms. Jesus still shines. He's still the light of the world. He's still our hope. Praise team's going to come. We're going to sing our invitation hymn. Whatever your decision is, we encourage you to make it as we stand and sing.